right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. During a meeting with your client's parent, your supervising analyst tells the parents that a new behavior plan is in place at the client's school in an attempt to decrease the client getting out of their seat. The analyst tells the parents the client may start getting out of their seat more at home. What is the analyst describing relative to the client's behavior? So, whose behavior are we looking at? We're looking at the client's behavior and specifically the description of that client's behavior. That's what the question is asking about. So let's find out how is the analyst describing that behavior? Well, the analyst says a new plan is in place, which is trying to decrease the client getting out of the seat. The analyst then says at home, they might get out of their seat more. So at school, we're trying to decrease getting out of seat. And then at home, as a result, they might start getting out of their seat more than usual. Now, why might that occur? What might cause them to decrease behavior in school and then increase that behavior in another setting? A, generalization. So generalization occurs when a response starts to happen in different environments. If the behavior is decreasing in one place and increasing in another, it's almost the opposite of generalization, right? Because generalization, we're seeing that same response in multiple environments. So generalization is not what is occurring here. What about B, escape? Is there anything in this question signaling that the function is escape? All we know is the client is getting out of their seat. We don't know why. Don't make assumptions about functions, right? We need information and facts if we want to identify a function. All we know here is the client is getting out of their seat. So B doesn't really make sense. What about behavior contrast? Behavior contrast says if we change a schedule in one environment to change a behavior, in another environment, the behavior is likely to move in the other direction if nothing is changed. In this case, in school, the behavior plan changed, behavior decreased. Behavior contrast says we can expect the behavior to now increase in another environment, which in this case is at home. And then D, imitation. Well, the client, we're not looking at them imitating anybody or imitating any skills or responses. What the analyst is describing here is what we would consider behavior contrast. In one environment, the plan changed, the behavior decreased. Behavior contrast says in a different environment, that behavior is likely to move the other direction. After a month of working with the client 4 to 5 times per week, your supervising behavior analyst tells you they are going to come out for an entire session and watch you implement the entire treatment plan. The analyst wants to check that all procedures and treatments are being done correctly. What is the analyst checking for? Okay, kind of a abstract question. We're just asking, what is the analyst checking for? And you might say, well, the question says the analyst is going to watch your entire session and they're going to watch the entire treatment plan and they're checking that procedures and treatments are being done correctly. Now that seems very broad, not very specific. So we're looking at a general idea here, right? What is the analyst checking for overall? A, treatment integrity. Treatment integrity is when the treatment is done correctly. If a treatment has procedural integrity or treatment integrity or procedural fidelity, that treatment is being done right. So if the analyst is looking at all procedures and treatments that they're being done correctly, the analyst is simply checking that there is treatment integrity in place. What about B, PREMAC principle? The PREMAC principle does not apply here. The PREMAC principle is a strategy where you use the opportunity to gain a consequence, access to a preferred response for engaging in a lower preferred response. B is not applicable here. C, generalization. The analyst is not looking for generalization in this case. The analyst is looking for your procedures and treatments and that they're being done correctly. And then D, variability. This word has to do with graphing in our data. If you look at a data path and it's there's a lot of fluctuation in the data. You might call that data variable. So the only answer that makes sense here is A, treatment integrity. Now, when you are breaking down questions, there's a reason we go through all the answer choices because we want to make sure we understand why B, C, and D aren't correct and why A is the only answer that is acceptable. So if you don't know what the pre-map principle is, for instance, pause here, go learn about the pre-map principle, and come back. That's the point of practicing, right? We're trying to sharpen our skills. We're trying to learn what we don't know and refine what we do know. Cheryl is trying to identify the source of the beeping sound in her house. She stands very still and listens closely. She determines that the beeping is happening about every 5 minutes and it sounds like it is coming from the kitchen. What type of measurement resembles what Cheryl is using to track beeping? So sometimes you might get questions like this where we might not be looking at an actual behavior or response. In this case, we're tracking beeping of something, right? There's just a beeping sound in Cheryl's house. And so we need to identify the measurement and how she's measuring the beeping and what does that measurement resemble. So Cheryl is looking for this beeping. She stands very still and listens, and she determines or says that the beeping is happening about every 5 minutes. So if this was beep number 1, and then 5 minutes passes, beep number 2, 5 minutes passes, beep number 3, so on and so forth. She's tracking this, right? She's tracking the 5 minutes. She's tracking time in between beeps. When we're measuring time in between things, what type of measurements are we using? Well, typically we're going to be using inter-response time and latency. If we look at A, frequency, she's not counting how many times it's beeping. She's just saying the beeping is happening about every 5 minutes. So if we think about inter-response time B, that's much more like what Cheryl is doing because time in between responses is inter-response time. If we are tracking responses and we said a response happens every 5 minutes, 5 minutes would be our inter-response time. Latency tracks the SD to the first response. So if she tracked from the time the beeping started, that might be latency, but she's tracking in between beeps, making it into response time. And then rate. Rate requires frequency. Cheryl is not taking frequency. Therefore, she cannot be taking rate. So the type of measurement that Cheryl is using to track beeping most resembles B into response time. Jamie's advisor sends her a huge document full of data from a recent project. The advisor tells Jamie to organize the data in an Excel spreadsheet so that it is easier to analyze later. Jamie is then to share her work with the advisor who will look it over. How will the advisor measure what Jamie has done? So looking at the advisor, it's another measurement question. And we're looking at the advisor and how are they going to measure Jamie's behavior? We need to figure out what is Jamie doing? Well, Jamie receives a huge document from her advisor. The advisor tells Jamie, organize the data so that it is easier to analyze. Jamie then shares her work with the advisor who will look it over. If we think about this, is the advisor watching and helping Jamie organize the data? No. Jamie is just going to share the work with the advisor, meaning the advisor isn't actually observing Jamie engage in this behavior. What is she measuring? She's measuring the outcome. What is the product of Jamie's work? That's what the advisor is measuring. So if we look at A, continuous measurement includes things like duration, inter-response time, latency, rate, and frequency. It's when we measure every instance or occurrence of behavior. And for continuous measurement, we have to actually observe the behavior happen. In this case, the advisor is not actually observing the behavior happening. She's observing the outcome, the product, or the result. And so B is much more applicable. When Jamie sends over what she's done, the advisor will then look at the permanent product and measure Jamie's work. What about C? Through an indirect measure, like asking Jamie what she did. The advisor could do that, but that's not what is occurring here. Jamie is sharing her work with the advisor, so the advisor can look at the permanent product. And then D, time sampling. Time sampling has to do with discontinuous measurements, where we're taking a sample of time. Again, the advisor is not doing that. She's not even watching Jamie work necessarily. She's simply asking Jamie to send a result of the behavior Therefore, she can measure the result. So the advisor is measuring what we would call B, permanent product. Which of the following answer choices most represents positive reinforcement, assuming behavior increases in the future due to the consequence? Now, let's first look at this idea that behavior is going to increase in the future due to the consequence. Why is that important? Well, in order to say something was reinforcement or something was punishment, we have to look at future behavior. And so the question is just letting us know that we can be sure that behavior did increase in the future, meaning reinforcement occurred. Our job here is to find which one was positive reinforcement, meaning in what consequence was something added that added reinforcement. So A, Jerry cannot open a jar, so he hands the jar to his wife, who removes the top for Jerry. Let's look at our antecedents, our behaviors, and our consequences. The antecedent is Jerry cannot open a jar. The response is hands jar to his wife. The consequence is removes the top. What was the consequence here? The top was removed. So this is more likely negative reinforcement. In the future, when Jerry needs to get a jar taken away or removed, he'll hand the jar to his wife. So A is out. B, people are making noise in the library, so Alex puts his headphones on and drowns out the noise. The antecedent is people are making noise in the library. Response is Alex puts his headphones on. The consequence is the noise is drowned out. So what has Alex done? What is the consequence? The noise is removed. When they say drown out, they mean the noise is no longer present for Alex. So to escape the noise, Alex put his headphones on. This again looks like negative reinforcement. And then C, Mary is done cooking dinner and calls for her kids to come to the table. The kids run downstairs and sit down. Antecedent, Mary cooks dinner. Response, calls kids to come to table. Consequence, kids come to table. This looks like positive reinforcement. C is likely our best answer. It isn't D because A and B look like negative reinforcement. So if we were to pick one, it would most likely be C. Mary is done cooking dinner and calls for her kids to come to the table. The kids run downstairs, sit down. All right, thank you for watching. Be sure to check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you subscribe if you have not already. Let us know when you pass. Work hard, study hard. See you soon.